The Iron Prince of the Desert, a kingdom built on shadows and steel. The desert was not silent. It breathed, it murmured, and it remembered. Beneath the golden dunes lay bones of forgotten empires, and in the wind's endless song, the ghosts of old kings whispered their unfinished stories. The sun was merciless, the air sharp as glass, and the horizon stretched forever, empty, save for the shimmer of heat and the faint shadow of a rider in iron. He was called Kael Arin, though most spoke of him only as the Iron Prince. He was not born to the throne. No, the throne had been forged for him, in blood and in steel. Kael's armor gleamed like molten silver under the burning light. Every plate bore scars, each a story, each a victory or a loss. He rode a black stallion bred for the sands, its hooves stirring dust like smoke. Around his neck hung a small charm of obsidian, smooth, cold, and etched with the mark of the desert's oldest god, the keeper of shadows. As the wind hissed through the dunes, Kael spoke softly, almost as if to himself. "The sand buries all things," he murmured. "But not me. Not yet." Behind him trailed a caravan of soldiers, their faces hidden beneath cloth and steel. They followed him not because they loved him, but because they feared him. He was the conqueror who had united the scattered tribes after 100 years of war. He was the one who had turned the barren wasteland into a kingdom of steel. But his kingdom was not built on peace. It was built on shadows, on secret deals, on betrayal, and on the silent work of unseen hands. Far to the north, in the broken city of Zahir, the last of the old priestesses watched Kael's banners rise. Her name was Sirah, and her eyes, once bright as dawn, were now clouded by the dust of centuries. She had seen kings come and go, but never one like him. "He bears the mark," she whispered, tracing the ancient sigil in the sand. "The mark of the iron blood. He will rise above all, or burn everything to ashes." Her apprentice, a young girl named Nima, frowned. "But the prophecies speak of a savior, not a destroyer." Sirah smiled sadly. "Child, in the desert, they are often the same thing." That night, Kael's camp glittered like a small city under the stars. Fires burned low, casting long shadows across the dunes. Kael sat alone in his tent, his sword lying across his knees. It was a weapon unlike any other. Its blade was black, forged from the heart of a fallen star. The weapon was said to whisper to its wielder in the quiet moments before dawn. And tonight it did. "You built them a kingdom," the voice hissed softly in his mind, "but they will never love you for it. They fear what they do not understand." Kael's hands tightened around the hilt. "I didn't ask for love," he whispered. "Only loyalty." "Loyalty is fragile," the blade replied. "Like glass in the heat." Kael exhaled slowly, pushing the voice away. He knew the sword's power was as dangerous as it was alluring. It gave him strength, but it also carried a curse. Every drop of blood it spilled bound his soul tighter to the shadows that had created it. The next morning, the Iron Prince rode to the edge of the dunes, where the sands met a cliff of black stone. Below lay a vast canyon filled with the ruins of an older civilization, the city of Sereth, once the jewel of the desert. It was said that the gods themselves had walked its streets before they turned to dust. Kael gazed down at the ruins. His engineers had begun to rebuild, carving new walls from the bones of the old ones. From these ruins would rise his capital, a city not of sand, but of steel. General Radhar, his most trusted warrior, approached and bowed. "The foundations are ready, my prince. The forges will burn by nightfall." Kael nodded. "Good. When Sereth rises again, it will not be a memory. It will be a warning." Radhar hesitated, then spoke carefully. "There are whispers among the men. They say the desert spirits stir when we work at night, that the ruins are haunted." Kael's lips curved into a thin smile. "Then let them be haunted. Even ghosts should remember who rules them." That night, as the workers built and the hammers rang, the winds changed. A storm rose from the southern horizon, a wall of dust and lightning that howled like 1,000 lost souls. The tents tore, Fires died, and men shouted over the chaos. Kael stood tall, unmoving, as the storm hit the camp. For a moment, it seemed as if the desert itself had come alive to test him. Then, through the haze of sand, he saw her. A figure cloaked in white, walking through the storm as if it were nothing. Her veil shimmered like glass, and her eyes, cold and blue as moonlight, met his. She spoke a single word, and though the wind screamed around them, he heard it clearly. Iron Prince. Kael froze. Who are you? She didn't answer. Instead, she raised her hand, and in her palm burned a mark, the same obsidian sigil he wore around his neck. The desert remembers, she said, and it has come to collect its due. Before Kael could reach her, the storm swallowed her whole, leaving only silence and the faint echo of her voice. When the winds finally died, half the camp was buried, and the ruins of Sereth were scarred anew. But Kael stood unbroken. His men watched him in awe, believing he had tamed the storm itself. In truth, he felt something stir within him, something old, something dark. The charm around his neck burned like fire. And deep beneath the sands, in the caverns below Sereth, something moved, something that had slept for 1,000 years, now awakened by the Iron Prince's ambition. When dawn broke, the desert looked calm again, as if the storm had been only a bad dream. But Kael Arin knew better. The storm had left something behind, not in the sands, but within him. He stood before the ruins of Sereth, his armor glinting in the pale morning light. The city's broken towers jutted from the ground like the ribs of a fallen beast, and between them, workers moved like ants, clearing rubble and laying new foundations. The air shimmered with heat and the sound of hammers. General Rathar approached, his cloak still coated with dust. The damage was not as great as we feared, he reported. We lost 30 men. The rest will rebuild. Kael nodded without turning. And the woman? Rathar frowned. There was no woman, my lord. No tracks. No trace. Some say it was the desert itself speaking. Kael's jaw tightened. The desert does not speak to me in riddles. He looked toward the horizon, where the storm had vanished, leaving only endless dunes. The image of the veiled woman haunted him, her eyes, the mark on her palm, her voice that had cut through the chaos like steel. Days turned into weeks, and Sereth began to rise again. What had once been dust and ruin now shimmered with the reflection of sunlight on metal. The forges burned day and night, melting the ores that Kael's miners brought from the deep caverns. Walls of iron rose where sandstone once crumbled. Kael called it New Sereth, a city of steel, born from shadow. Beneath the surface, his engineers dug tunnels and chambers, secret halls and hidden forges where his most trusted blacksmiths worked on weapons never seen before. They forged blades that hummed with strange energy and armor that could withstand even the desert's fury. To the people, Kael became a legend, the Iron Prince who defied gods and storms alike. But among his council, whispers grew. They said the forges burned too hot, that strange symbols had begun to appear on the metal, etched by unseen hands. One night, Kael descended into the deepest tunnel beneath the new city. He carried a torch and the black sword, the one that whispered to him. The air grew colder as he went deeper, until he reached a sealed chamber of smooth, dark stone. It was ancient, far older than Sereth. On the walls, carvings told of an empire that had ruled long before the age of men. A kingdom that had harnessed the power of the desert's heart, a crystal said to contain the soul of the sands themselves. Kael's torch flickered, and a voice rose from the shadows. You walk paths that were closed for a reason. Kael spun, hand on his sword. Show yourself. From the darkness stepped the veiled woman. She looked the same as she had in the storm, untouched by time or dust. You are not meant to wake what sleeps here, she said. Kael glared. I've already awakened it. She moved closer, her eyes glowing faintly. Then the desert will remember your name for all the wrong reasons. He stepped forward, defiant. You speak as if you know me. I do, she said. You carry the blood of the old kings. The iron line, born from the first conqueror who made a pact with shadows to rule the sands. His curse lives in you, Kael Arin. Kael's grip tightened on his sword. Then let it make me stronger. Her voice grew quiet. Power taken from the dark always asks for payment. Then she vanished, dissolving into a swirl of sand that drifted back into the cracks of the stone. When Kael returned to the surface, he found his generals waiting. Among them was Lord Taran, the advisor, who had been with him since the first campaign. "The people rejoice, my prince," Taran said, smiling faintly. "They call you the rebuilder of empires." Kael stared at the glowing city beyond. "Empires don't rise without sacrifice." Taran's smile faded. "And yet some say the cost grows too high. The blacksmiths complain of voices in the forges. Men go missing. The night guards swear they see figures moving beneath the sands." Kael turned sharply. "Fear is the language of the weak. Tell them their loyalty is worth more than their superstition." Taran bowed. "As you wish, my lord." But as the advisor left, Kael noticed something, a small symbol carved into the iron wall beside him. The same mark as the one the woman had shown him. He traced it with his glove, feeling the metal pulse faintly beneath his touch. It was warm, alive. That night, the Iron Prince dreamt. He saw a desert made of black glass. He stood in the center of it, surrounded by broken crowns. Above him, the sky was red, and from the horizon came a shadow, a figure in armor like his own, but hollow-eyed and crowned with thorns of iron. "You think you build," the figure said, its voice echoing like thunder. "But you only repeat." Kael drew his sword. "Who are you?" "I am what you become," the shadow said. "The prince who built his kingdom on fear and called it order. The ruler who forgot that even iron rusts." When Kael struck, the shadow shattered into 1,000 pieces, and from each fragment rose another figure, another reflection of himself, until the desert was filled with them. He woke in a cold sweat, the black sword lying beside him, glowing faintly in the dark. By dawn, Kael summoned his generals. "Double the watch. Seal the tunnels. No one goes below without my order." Rathar frowned. "What's down there, my prince?" Kael looked toward the horizon, where the rising sun burned blood-red. A secret best left buried. But even as he said it, he knew it was too late. The storm, the woman, the shadows beneath Sereth, they were all part of something greater. Something that had chosen him. And as the wind rose again, carrying whispers across the dunes, the Iron Prince of the desert stood at the edge of his gleaming city and felt the first cracks form in the empire he had built on shadows and steel. The city of New Sereth shone like a silver mirage under the scorching sun. Its towers rose tall, its walls gleamed with polished iron, and its streets thrummed with life. But beneath its strength lay something uneasy, an invisible pulse, a whisper running under every hammer's strike and every soldier's step. Kael Arin, the Iron Prince, walked the high balcony of his citadel, watching his city below. From this height, he could see everything: the shimmering roofs, the flowing markets, the soldiers drilling in perfect lines. Yet, despite its order, Kael felt an unrest creeping through his veins. The black sword hung on his hip, silent now, but its presence pressed against his mind like a held breath. Since the night of the dream, Kael had not slept easily. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the shadow wearing his face, the reflection that whispered, "You only repeat." That morning, Lord Taran entered the chamber, bowing deeply. "My prince, the council gathers. There are matters that demand your voice." Kael's eyes narrowed. Matters or doubts? Taran hesitated. Perhaps both. Kael's armor clinked softly as he turned. "Then let them speak their doubts. I built this kingdom from sand and blood. I can rebuild it again if I must." In the great hall, the council sat around a table of carved black steel. Flames from the torches reflected on their faces, some nervous, some defiant. Lord Taran began, his tone careful. "We honor your victories, my prince. But the men grow restless. The storms come more often. The forges burn too long. They say the desert hungers again. General Radhar crossed his arms. They say more than that. Workers vanish in the tunnels. The smiths claim shadows walk among them, whispering secrets. Kael's gaze hardened. Fear has always haunted weak men. If they disappear, it is because they flee their duty. Terran's eyes flickered. And if they don't flee, my prince? If something else takes them? The hall fell silent. Even the torches seemed to dim. Then Kael spoke softly, dangerously. The desert obeys those who master it. I am no slave to its hunger. He stood, his iron boots ringing on the stone. You all swore your lives to me, to build a kingdom eternal. You call it cursed? Then we will forge a curse that endures. I will not let ghosts rule me. The council bowed, some out of loyalty, others out of fear. Only Terran held his gaze longer than the others, something cold and knowing in his eyes. That night, Kael went again to the lower tunnels. He dismissed his guards and carried only his torch and the black blade. The deeper he went, the more he felt it, the pulse beneath the earth. Like a heart, slow and heavy. The tunnels ended in a great cavern lined with obsidian walls. In its center lay a pit, circular and vast, glowing faintly with amber light. And there, suspended above the pit by iron chains, floated a crystal, the desert's heart. It was enormous, pulsing with light as if it breathed. When Kael stepped closer, his charm of obsidian flared with heat. A whisper filled the air. So the prince comes to awaken his throne. The voice was not human. It came from everywhere at once, deep and ancient. Kael raised his chin. I am no servant. I came to command. Command? The voice echoed, almost laughing. You command the surface, Prince of Iron. But the desert rules beneath. Even your steel is forged from its bones. Kael gritted his teeth. I built this kingdom for my people.
No.
You built it for yourself. For your name to echo when the sands forget all else. Just as your ancestor did. The crystal pulsed brighter. Kael's sword trembled in his hand, humming with power. You carry the blood of the first Iron King, the voice whispered. And his sin runs in you. He took the shadows for strength, and in return, they took his soul. Kael's eyes flashed. Then I will finish what he began. He drove his sword into the ground before the crystal. The cavern shuddered. The crystal's light exploded outward, filling the tunnels. For a moment, Kael saw visions, cities burning, thrones melting, faces twisted by time. And among them, the veiled woman, watching him with sorrow. You have broken the seal, she whispered. The heart will wake. And it will not stop until all of this is ash. When Kael returned to the surface, dawn was breaking. But the sky above Sereth was not gold. It was gray, heavy with strange clouds. The people whispered in the streets. Then the ground trembled. From the edges of the city, cracks split open, thin as hair at first, then wide enough to swallow carts whole. From within them rose black mist, thick, coiling alive. Kael's guards ran to him. My lord! The ground bleeds. Kael watched silently as the mist spread, swallowing shadows and sunlight alike. No, he murmured. It awakens. By midday, the city's forges began to fail. The iron glowed too hot, the metal turning red without fire. Workers fled in panic. The temples filled with prayers, but the winds carried no mercy. In the council chamber, chaos reigned. Lords argued, priests wept. Terran's voice cut through them all. This is no natural curse. Something beneath the city stirs. You've brought it here, Kael. Kael's hand went to his sword. You forget yourself. Terran stood tall, unafraid. No, my prince. You forget what you swore. To protect your people, not doom them. For a moment, Kael saw not his advisor, but a stranger filled with rage and disappointment. The man who had guided him through every campaign now stood as his accuser. If you will not stop this, Terran said, then I will. Kael's voice dropped to a whisper. You would betray me? To save what little remains, Terran said. Yes. There was a flash of steel. When it was over, Taran lay bleeding on the floor, his eyes wide in disbelief. The hall fell silent. Kael's sword dripped red. "There will be no betrayal," Kael said coldly. "Not in my kingdom." He turned and left as the council trembled behind him. That night, Kael climbed the walls of the city. The wind howled across the dunes, carrying the scent of iron and storm. Below, the cracks glowed faintly, and the black mist pulsed like veins through the streets. The Iron Prince looked out at the horizon, where lightning flickered in the clouds. He thought of the woman's words, the voice beneath the earth, and the shadow in his dreams. He whispered into the wind, "If the desert wants me, it will have to take me by force." The sword glowed in answer, faint and hungry. And deep beneath Sereth, the heart of the desert throbbed once more, its rhythm now matching Kael's own. The two had become one. The winds howled through the streets of New Sereth, carrying whispers that were not of this world. The air itself seemed alive, thick, restless, charged with unseen power. The once golden dunes around the city had turned gray, and the sky above burned with an unholy light. From his high tower, Kael Arin, the Iron Prince, looked upon the city he had built with his own hands and watched it unravel before his eyes. The black mist that had seeped from the cracks now wound through the streets like rivers of smoke. Where it touched stone, iron corroded. Where it touched flesh, men turned pale and hollow-eyed. The people whispered that the heart of the desert had awakened, and it had found its voice through Kael himself. The sword at his side pulsed faintly, humming with a strange rhythm. Every beat matched his own heartbeat, and with every pulse, Kael felt something slip further away. His warmth, his calm, his humanity. Inside the citadel, the council chamber stood empty. Lord Taran's body had been buried quietly at dusk, but his death had spread faster than the plague of shadows. Some of the generals had fled into the dunes. Others barricaded themselves in the armories, praying to gods who no longer listened. Only General Radhar remained. He entered the chamber as Kael stood by the window, silent. "My prince," Radhar said quietly, "the outer districts have fallen. The people flee into the desert, but the storm chases them. What are your orders?" Kael did not turn. "Let them go. The desert will decide who deserves to live." Radhar hesitated. "You sound like them now, like the priests who say this is punishment." Kael's voice hardened. "Do I look like a man being punished, General?" Radhar's eyes dropped to the prince's hands. The veins beneath his skin glowed faintly, a metallic shimmer like molten iron. He said nothing. Kael turned, his expression cold, but his eyes haunted. "Everything I built was meant to last. Steel was supposed to outlive flesh, stone, even faith. But it seems even iron bleeds when the gods envy it." Radhar bowed his head. "The gods did not make this curse, Kael. You did." For a heartbeat, silence hung between them. Then Kael's voice dropped, soft as the edge of a blade. "Leave me, Radhar, before loyalty becomes a death sentence." The general bowed once more and left, though he did not look back. That night, Kael stood in the Hall of Forges, the heart of New Sereth's creation. The furnaces were cold now, the fires long dead. The once bright chamber was filled with shadows that seemed to breathe. As Kael walked between the silent forges, he saw movement in the dark. A shape, slender and glowing faintly with blue light. It was her, the veiled woman from the storm. "You've seen what your ambition has done," she said softly. "Sereth burns not from hatred, but from hunger. The heart you awakened was never meant to serve man." Kael's voice was steady, though his hands trembled. "Then why give it to us at all? Why let kings rise if they are only to fall?" She lifted her gaze. "Because the desert remembers. And remembrance is a cruel thing." Kael stepped closer. "You knew this would happen." "Yes," she said. "The Iron Line always ends the same way. Each prince tries to master the desert's heart. Each becomes its prisoner." Kael drew his sword, its black surface catching the faint blue of her glow. "Then tell me how to break it." She looked at him, almost sorrowfully. "To break it, you must destroy the heart itself. But it is bound to you now." If it dies, so do you. Kael smiled faintly, though his eyes were hollow. Then I'll rule even in death. Her voice trembled. No one rules the desert. They only fade into its memory. Before Kael could answer, she vanished again, her form dissolving into silver sand that scattered across the floor. The next morning, Kael gathered what soldiers remained. Barely 1,000 stood before him now, their armor dull, their faces pale. The Iron Prince raised a sword. "We do not flee," he said. "We do not beg. We are steel, forged in storm and fire. If the desert demands our lives, it will take them from our blades." The men roared, their fear swallowed by his conviction. They marched toward the ruins of the lower city, where the cracks in the ground pulsed brightest. The sands there churned like water, and from them rose shapes, figures made of shadow and dust, twisted forms with glowing eyes and blades of black wind. The ancient guardians of the desert, awakened by Kael's defiance. The soldiers fought bravely, their iron clashing against the storm's fury. But the shadows multiplied with every fallen man. Kael fought among them, his sword blazing with dark light, cutting through mist and steel alike. Every strike filled him with strength, but also something else. With each kill, his heart grew heavier, his breath colder. He was winning and dying at the same time. Hours later, the battlefield was silent. The sun hung low, red as blood. Kael stood alone amidst the dead, his armor scorched, his blade cracked. Around him, the city burned, its towers collapsing, its streets sinking into the earth. From the center of the ruin rose the crystal heart, now massive and blazing with white fire. It pulsed with the rhythm of a god's fury. Kael fell to his knees, staring at it. "You wanted a king," he whispered. "Here I am." "We wanted a memory," the heart replied, its voice like 1,000 echoes. "And you have given us one." The crystal's light flared. Kael screamed as pain tore through his body, iron veins spreading, his skin turning to steel. In his final moment of clarity, Kael drove his sword into the heart. The ground exploded in light and sound, and everything, stone, fire, shadow, collapsed inward. Then came silence. When the light faded, New Sereth was gone. In its place lay a vast crater of glass and ash. The winds blew quietly over it, carrying only the faint shimmer of heat. The people who survived fled far into the dunes, whispering tales of the Iron Prince who defied the gods and paid the price. But sometimes, when the storms passed and the night grew still, travelers claimed to see a figure standing in the heart of the crater, a man made of iron, unmoving, gazing toward the horizon. They said he was not dead, only waiting. The desert was silent again. No smoke, no screams, no glimmer of the iron towers that once shone like suns. Only wind and memory. Where New Sereth had once stood, there was now only a crater of glass and ash, smooth as still water beneath the burning sun. When the wind swept across it, it sang, a low, sorrowful tone that echoed for miles. The people who lived far beyond the dunes said it was the voice of the Iron Prince, still whispering to his fallen city. But the desert does not forget, and even silence can tell a story. Centuries passed. The sands shifted, swallowing the ruins until not even their shadows remained. Travelers came and went, merchants crossed the old trails, and nomads built new tribes on forgotten bones. Yet, all of them knew the tale. They spoke of Kael Arin, the prince who had built a kingdom from nothing, a city of metal and might, forged by his own hand. They said he had challenged the gods and the desert itself, and though he lost, he had carved his name into the bones of time. No one truly knew what had become of him. Some said his soul had been taken by the heart of the desert, bound to guard it for eternity. Others claimed that when the last light of Sereth faded, he became one with the sands, the wind that howls across the dunes at night. And some whispered a darker truth, that the Iron Prince still lived, his heart of steel beating somewhere beneath the desert floor, waiting for the day when mankind would once again reach for power beyond its grasp. In the ruins of what had once been the Hall of Forges, a young scavenger named Rafi stumbled upon a shard of black metal. It was smooth, impossibly cold, and marked with an ancient sigil, the same one that had once hung from Kael's neck. When he touched it, the ground beneath him trembled. The air filled with a faint hum, and a voice brushed against the edge of his mind. "Do you seek to build?" Rafi dropped the shard in fear, but the voice continued, calm and patient. "Do you seek to rule? To forge a name that will outlast the sands?" The boy's heart pounded. He stared at the glowing fragment, caught between terror and wonder. "Who are you?" he whispered. "I am the first," the voice replied. "The one who forged a crown from shadow. The one the desert remembers." The wind rose suddenly, swirling the sand into a spiral. From within the haze, the faint outline of a man took shape, tall, armored, and crowned with iron. His eyes glowed faintly beneath the helmet, like embers under ash. "I am Kael Arin," the figure said. "The Iron Prince of Sereth." Rafi fell to his knees. You're a ghost?" "A memory," Kael answered. "Bound to what I created. You stand upon the bones of my dream." He stepped closer, and the air shimmered with heat. "The desert devours everything: flesh, stone, faith. But steel endures. I built this kingdom to outlive death itself." And it did. Rafi's eyes widened. "But the city it fell. Everyone says you destroyed it." Kael's gaze turned distant.
"No."
"I became it." The wind howled again, and the dunes shifted around them, revealing faint lines beneath the sand, the outline of massive walls, towers, and streets made of glass and metal. "The desert took my body," Kael said, "but my will remains. Every storm that shapes these dunes, every whisper that stirs the night, it is me." He looked down at Rafi, his voice softening. "The desert will always hunger for kings. One day, it will find another who dares to challenge it. Perhaps it has found him already." Before Rafi could answer, the wind surged, and the figure dissolved into sand, leaving only the black shard behind. It pulsed once, then went still. Rafi stared at it for a long time. Then slowly, he picked it up again. Years passed. The boy grew into a man, and then a leader. Villages gathered beneath his banner, drawn by his strange wisdom and the shard he carried. He spoke of unity, of strength through discipline and steel. When they asked where his vision came from, he only smiled. "The desert remembers its king," he would say. And so, a new city began to rise, not golden, not proud, but built carefully from the bones of the old world. Its walls shone with iron and stone, its heart pulsed with the rhythm of forges, and its people whispered prayers to the wind before every battle. At the city's center, beneath a great arch, a single statue stood, a man in dark armor, holding a sword that pointed toward the earth. The inscription below it was simple. "Here lies Kael Arin, the Iron Prince of the desert. He built a kingdom from shadows, and became its heart of steel." Sometimes, when the desert storms rolled across the dunes, people said they saw the statue move, its eyes glowing faintly for a moment before returning to stone. Others claimed they could hear a voice in the wind, deep and steady, whispering the same words that once began it all. "The sand buries all things.
But not me."
Not yet. And so the legend lived on, not of a tyrant, nor of a savior, but of a man who defied time itself. The desert remembered him, as it remembers all things built from blood, shadow, and steel.